Joining me now is Maria Robinson. Welcome, Maria, and thank you so much for being here. I just want to start off with the very basic question that everyone always wants to know, and that is, why are you running for state representative?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me today, Audrey.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. I'm running for state representative because I care so much about Framingham. I live here with my 2 children, as well as my husband, and we recently just moved my parents up here. So I'm really invested in the community and making sure that the future of Framingham is bright in every possible way, and for a variety of different citizens. I've spent the past decade working in state legislatures across the country on clean energy legislation to help fight climate change. And there are so many more issues that we need to work on, particularly here in Framingham and in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I really felt that I could take my skills and my experience to the State House and make a difference. And that's really what I'm trying to do, is make a difference in people's lives and make the world a slightly better place than where I found it.
Okay, well, what do you think in doing that and taking on that job and having to deal with all the different issues that are before us? What do you think are Framingham's most pressing issues that you can have an impact on from the State House?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of our issues are economic focused. There's economic inequality, and there are different ways that we can fix that, whether it is making sure that there is a variety of translations on the MWRTA buses, which currently doesn't exist. Everything is only in English.
Those are the local buses?
Those are the local buses that go around that you see. I live up on Edgell Road. We've taken it occasionally where you flag them down, but there aren't translations for the different schedules. So say Patriots Day is happening, people might not know that the buses aren't running on that day and they'll be waiting for a long time. So that's a real problem. I think economic development is huge for Framingham, as we have become a city now and we're adding a variety of new housing units in town. We need to figure out how we can continue to develop in a way that's sustainable and really provides solutions to the needs of our citizens here. And I think a lot of that is making sure that there's adequate funding from the state level, whether it's for finishing the rail trail and connecting to the Bruce Freeman Trail, which is certainly a big priority for some folks on the north side, or whether it's closing the funding gap for special education. Right now, Framingham isn't receiving the amount of funding that it was promised for special education reimbursement. And what could we be doing with that money if we were getting that from the state level in order to help develop? Could we invest more in the city? Could we change our tax base? There are lots of different creative things that I think would provide our city council and our mayor with a little more flexibility in the budget if we were ensuring that all of these priorities are being met at the state level.
Okay, well, speaking about that, what do you think it is that you uniquely bring to the table differently than any of the other candidates in order to make you an effective state rep? Absolutely.
So I have worked with state agencies, with state leaders, secretaries, with state legislators. I have written legislation from the seed of an idea to the point where it's gotten passed in the governor's desk. And so I know what it takes to get legislation passed. And I will say that it is not the world's prettiest process. And it takes a lot of cooperation, a lot of coordination. And I think that it's really important to be able to continue to make sure that your priorities are known and figuring out how to have leadership opportunities in the State House. And I think that's the kind of experience that I in particular bring, as well as a sense of collaboration. People are willing to work with you on issue A, and even if they disagree with you on issue B, you need to continue to be able to have a working relationship with everyone in the State House, no matter what happens in any sort of fight. And for me, there's no burning bridges. I've said to people in this campaign, even if you're not planning to vote for me, I'd love to hear what you have to say. I want to know what you are concerned about, because if I end up representing you, I'm representing everybody. And I want to make sure that everyone's concerns are heard, and I think that collaborative nature will help me in the State House.
Okay, great. Well, you mentioned briefly about the Framingham schools. You did mention special education. And my question to you was going to be, what do you think is the largest challenge that we face in the Framingham schools, and what can you do about that in that role?
Absolutely, and I think it is a funding challenge more than anything else. We have an incredible school system. It's one of the reasons why my husband and I decided to move to Framingham. We have incredible diversity and high quality education here. We do have 3 schools that are level 3 right now. And I think a lot of that is figuring out the best way to educate those students because they are coming from a different background than a lot of the other students in the community. And so it's certainly by no means the fault of the teachers or the students themselves. It's making sure that those resources are there. And so by looking at some of the Chapter 70 funding and looking at the formula to ensure that English language learning students, as well as some special education students, are receiving an adequate amount of funding from the state budget, because Framingham has a disproportionately high number of both of those kinds of students. And it is more expensive to educate them, but that does not mean that we should not be educating them in the way that they deserve. And so to me, making sure that we make some of those changes at the state level would be one of those top priorities for me, to ensure that Dr. Tremblay and the entire school system has all of the resources that they're asking for.
Okay, now in terms of economic development, let's take that same question and apply it to economic development. What do you think is the greatest challenge that we face for economic development in Framingham, and what can you do from the State House to help the city with that?
Sure, I think one of the greatest challenges we have in economic development here is our tax rate, and it's very difficult for the city to change that. We have residents who, let's be honest, I own a home, I pay taxes, I go, oh my God, every time we get our tax bill, and I have that same reaction. But at the same time, I'm incredibly grateful for all of the public services that we have. And I think that our businesses here deserve to benefit from some of the continued growth that our city has. I think there are lots of ways that we can find additional funding at the state level. So one of the projects that I worked on early on in my career was looking at ways that we can consolidate energy bills across different state buildings. So there's a base level cost for every single energy bill that is issued to any state building. And individual buildings were receiving 10, 20, 100 different bills for different departments. And if we were able to consolidate that, that would have saved millions of dollars. Unfortunately, that program didn't move forward. So those savings are still actually
That
on
would have
the
been a
table.
state program?
That would have been a state program. And that's something that the legislature could authorize the state to look at.
Is it a dead issue, or can you revive that?
I think it absolutely can be revived. It's just a question of ensuring that there are people with those kinds of priorities at the different agencies, and certainly that's something the legislature can authorize to make sure that kind of study happens.
Okay.
And so that type of funding would be really helpful and then on the table for cities like Framingham.
Okay. Which of Chris Walsh's bills will you continue to work on?
Absolutely. So I think one, to honor Representative Walsh, who was just wonderful and really focused on making sure that Framingham got what it deserved. And I want to continue that legacy. One that would be directly to honor him is he was looking at finding a way to honor architects across the Commonwealth by having an architect laureate in order to increase the visibility of our architects. And I think that would be something that I'd love to see named after him in the legislature. Certainly, Bruce Freeman Trail is one of those issues that he is very focused on. Another area would be he was looking at some potential changes to TDRs at the state level in order to help benefit Framingham. And I think that would be a high priority as well. I know that he was very focused on environmental issues, and that would certainly be something that I would continue on as well.
A couple of his other priorities were caring for parents, aging in place, dying with dignity. Are you familiar with those efforts that were underway?
Absolutely, and I've been talking with his staff and having conversations about making sure that there are adequate resources and that those bills don't get dropped into future sessions, because I know not all of them are making it to Ways and Means right now. Okay.
Do you have an interest in pursuing legislation to change the Dover Amendment?
So, Dover Amendment is a very fun topic. I think that there are ways that we can change the Dover Amendment, and I would definitely be interested in pursuing legislation to do so. I think when you start to open up the entire Dover Amendment, you start to get into a statewide food fight. For those who aren't familiar, the Dover Amendment, of course, allows for nonprofit entities to avoid certain zoning and tax-related rules that cities and municipalities put forward. And so one of the things that I'm looking at is whether there could be specific zones set by cities and municipalities that could be non-applicable to the Dover Amendment instead of fully opening it up, because we recognize that large universities, Boston College, my own alma mater, MIT, fight back really hard against any changes to the Dover Amendment. But if we were to just make a small amendment that would allow cities and towns to designate certain zones, and I imagine in Framingham that would probably be parts of downtown, even if it was just within a half-mile radius of an area, could have really significant impact for economic growth.
Okay. What about the status of either sanctuary city or gateway city for Framingham? Do you think that that's something that Framingham should avoid or embrace?
So I support the Safe Communities Act that is going through the legislature right now. Obviously, any sort of sanctuary city decision would be made by the mayor and the city council as part of their work. But I think the Safe Communities Act, which helps allow for local policing to really focus on local issues, as our police chief Trask has emphasized to us that it is his job to ensure that Framingham is safe.
Yep.
I think the most important thing is being able to have people feel free to report crimes and to be able to be witnesses to crimes without fear of any sort of retribution or being picked up by ICE. And so I think the Safe Communities Act would help allow him to do his job the way that he wants to do his job. And so I'm very supportive of that.
Okay. What is your opinion on the number of social services facilities located in Framingham?
I think that the number of social services in Framingham is sort of a double-edged sword, for lack of a better phrase. One, I think it's wonderful because we have a large population of people who need social services, and being able to be centrally located and easily accessible by public transportation is really important. At the same time, in talking about the Dover Amendment previously, I think it's important that it doesn't somehow hinder economic development to Framingham, and I think that we've found ways, whether it's the local colleges. FSU has done a great job of providing back to the community, and I think that if we can encourage some of these social services to do that, that would be a great commitment.
Okay. The state has not yet stepped up to deal with some of the dangerous situations we have, for example, with state highways like Route 9.
Yes.
In spite some best efforts to get some attention on that matter. What do you think you can do to help with that?
Sure. One of the first things would be a full study of what's going on with Route 9 in terms of pedestrians who have very unfortunately been in massive accidents that have led to death in some cases. I think it's a public safety tragedy, and it's something that we need to be focused on, and it's the role of the Framingham state representative to be pushing for that. And I know that we are not the only ones along Route 9 with this issue, but because we have a larger amount of development there, it is more of a problem for us.
Now, let's just say you were elected and you were on Beacon Hill as a state representative and you had a magic wand, a state house magic wand, and you could change one thing about Framingham. What would it be?
One thing about Framingham. I think one thing that I would change about Framingham would be to have 93 and 95 paying tolls instead of 90 paying tolls. I think that would be something that would be incredibly helpful to Framingham. I guess the other thing that I would say in a magic wand would be for Beacon Hill to give us the funding to have cars be able to go over the commuter rail, and I think that would solve a lot of problems that we have traffic-wise downtown. Those would be some of the big things.
I'd like to give you the magic wand, but I don't have it.
if only, Audrey. If only. I wish.
Okay. What political campaigns have you worked on in Framingham? In what roles? And what does your campaign team look like? Who's on your team?
Absolutely. So I'm thrilled about the teams that I've worked on. I'll be honest, I haven't worked on a winning campaign here in Framingham, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to change that around. I worked with my dear friend Robert Case on his city council campaign, and we knocked a lot of doors out there and had some good conversations with folks, and then also worked with Seti Warren's gubernatorial campaign most recently here in Framingham. I have the wonderful Norma Schulman working day in, day out on field game for me. Again, Robert Case and his husband have been incredible resources. His husband, Chris Teague, is my treasurer of the campaign. And I have to say, I'm so thrilled. I have a team that's almost all women.
Campaign manager?
Right now, we're still in the process of interviewing campaign managers. This race sort of just popped out of nowhere, I'll be honest with you. But I have quite a few folks that I'm in the process of interviewing this week, actually.
Okay,
so
great.
Stay tuned.
Well, thank you so much. Best to you.
Thank you very much, Audrey.
For more information, go to votemariarobinson.com. And now stay tuned for a discussion with candidate Michael Gatlin after this short break.